Thanks, Ashley. Welcome everyone to the 2027 Final Year Information Night. My name's Pippin Holmes. I'm the Final Year Program Coordinator and Academic Lead. I'm going to be supported tonight by Ashley Fielding, helping me with the IT. So Ashley, do you mind going to the next slide? Oh, I'm not sure whether there we go. So we would like to pay our respects to the Whadjuk Noongar Budja Nations, the original lands of UWA and the Rural Clinical School of WA, which has now journeyed into many lands across the state. And I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Southern Yamaji people in Jumbunnu, Geraldton, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which you are joining from today and recognise the privilege we have to live, work and learn on these lands across WA. I'd like to welcome a few other people. So our partner university leadership teams and representatives that are here tonight from Notre Dame, UWA and Curtin. Also Andrew Kirk, the Head of Division for RCSWA. A number of final year RCSWA staff that have joined. Like I mentioned, Ashley and Misty, who's our ASO support, and also some current and former final year students who have joined us. So just some housekeeping. This is being recorded. The main session will be, and the slides will be distributed afterwards. There is the chat function. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and Ashley can take you off mute. At the end of the session, we will be going into breakout rooms based on sites, which you can move between. Those sessions won't be recorded. So we've got a bit to get through tonight. We're going to go through what the final year program involves. We're going to talk about how it's different to the year you're currently having. We'll also talk about the selection process and hear from one of our former students. So the final year program started in 2019, and this came about from student interest. So there were penultimate year students in Bunbury who wanted to stay in a rural location for their university studies. So it started with those 4 in Bunbury, and this year we have 20 students across 4 sites. And with the growth of the WACS internships, there have been more opportunities for our students to continue working rurally, and over 70% of students completing the final year RCS program have gone on to complete a rural internship. Next slide, thanks Ash. Right, so we're going to talk about what to expect with the final year program. Firstly, talking about curriculum, teaching and assessments. So final year is about preparing you to be an intern, and it's very clinically focused. On the final year program with RCS, it's very different to your current year that you are having on RCS. So unlike your current year, penultimate year, where all the RCS students are completing the same RCS program, when you're in final year, you will go back to completing your home university curriculum, teaching, assessments and exams. So I like to describe it, it's a bit like homeschool. So most of your teaching will be online from your home universities. So that's live tutorials or pre-recorded lectures or online modules. RCS will deliver or coordinate some of the teaching at your local sites, particularly those hands-on skills or simulation activities. We also do a bit of online teaching to complement your home university teaching. But all of your assessments, including your in-training assessments throughout the year, are managed by your home universities. And unlike this year, where the RCS MCs can see how you're tracking by your reflex platform, we don't have that equivalent oversight in final year. That's all managed by your home universities. So we won't be the ones sending you reminders about when your assessments are due. That will all come from your home university. So just bear in mind that at your sites, your final year peers may not be from the same university as you. So if you're someone that relies on others to remind you that assessments are due or to keep you on track and accountable with your study plans, then you may struggle with this RCS final year format. The last thing to say on this slide is that you will have to return to Perth for your exams at the end of the year. So the next slide looks at your curriculum for next year. So I'll just let you have a little bit of a look at the disciplines that you will cover. You'll notice there that there is certainly more of a focus on acute care, so emergency, ICU, anaesthetics. There's also some subspecialties like dermatology for UWA or rheumatology for Notre Dame. And each program has some similarities, but there's also some differences there. Next slide. Thanks, Ash. So we'll talk about clinical placements on RCS. So it's important for you to understand that while we can't replicate the metropolitan clinical experience exactly, you will have quality rural experiences, which I'm sure you've already had a taste of so far this year. So you will need to be adaptable and flexible and organised to ensure that you cover your curriculum. For example, you might have one of these visiting specialists like the dermatologist in town, and despite you being allocated to a surgical term that week, you might need to try and jump out of surgery and get into the clinic with the dermatologist so that you cover that aspect of the curriculum. Our students consistently report that the clinical learning environment is one of the strengths of the final year program. So hands-on learning is a big feature, working in close-knit teams, including having access to senior doctors, exposure to a diverse case mix, and supportive supervisors and mentors with good quality feedback. Thanks, Ash. Next slide. Okay, so what to expect from RCS. So you will be supported by MCs and ASOs at your site, myself as the final year program academic lead, and our ASO support team, such as Ashley and Misty. But in terms of staffing levels, it's important to be mindful that our staff are on a much smaller appointment compared to the penultimate year program. So currently on our RCS sites, we have a final year MC who's working a day, maybe a day and a half a week to support the final year program and all the various curriculums for the students that are on their site. And the ASOs do a lot of additional work required on top of their usual duties to help the final year program work. So what RCS does do is deliver and coordinate, like I mentioned, some of your local teaching, assist you in completing some assessments if you're not able to get that opportunity while on clinical placement. We coordinate your clinical placements, help you with exam preparation, provide mentorship, and we advocate for you and the final year program and liaise with your home universities to make sure it's a smooth year. So the next slide is probably what you've all been wanting to hear about. We are super excited to announce that we're going to be expanding our final year program next year from 20 to 30 places. And currently this is the plan for where those spots will be in Broome, Geraldton, Bunbury and Albany. And all students from all 4 university streams, so UWA, Curtin, Notre Dame, Fremantle and KCRMT are eligible to apply. Thanks, Ash. Next slide. So this is a busy slide and we're going to start talking about some logistics. So the RCS final year program is primarily self-funded. So we require you to sign a stat deck confirming your financial independence prior to entry in the program, and that's one of the things that you need to include in your application. So unfortunately, at this stage, there's no additional government funding provided for the rural final year program. But at RCS, we recognise that this is a really important part of supporting the ongoing careers of our colleagues in rural medicine. And so we've redirected a portion of the penultimate year funds to offer financial assistance to final year students and to keep the program running. But that doesn't cover all of the costs. So these are the things that we will assist with. So travel to and from sites at the start of year and end of year. So SOY is start of year, EOY is end of year. At the end of the year, RCS will cover the costs of travel for you to return to Perth for your exams, but we're not able to cover the cost of accommodation for that time in Perth. When you come to site and leave at the end of the year, you will be responsible for arranging and paying for the relocation of your personal belongings, but you can then claim a reimbursement back from RCS, and the amount depends on which site you go to. Just also be mindful that you may need to travel during the year to neighbouring towns to complete your clinical placement. So, for example, Bunbury students sometimes travel to Busselton, Albany to Mount Barker, and expect that you will likely be driving in your own vehicle for those placements, and that will be self-funded. There may be an RCS vehicle available, but often not. In terms of accommodation, so it's available for students if it's just you coming to the site, but you will have to pay rent. And this year the rent has been $230 a week, and we're yet to confirm what that will be for next year. Same rules apply as in penultimate year, so there's a $500 bond and no pets allowed. And again, like this year, if you have a partner or family joining you at site, you will have to self-arrange and pay for your accommodation, and do consider this when it comes to your site preferences. Orientation. So we are still waiting on confirmation from your universities about how orientation is going to look and where you need to be. It's most likely that you can do your orientation at the rural sites, but we will confirm those details when we get them. It's likely to be the week of the 25th of January. So please be mindful of this when booking holidays and electives. And like I said, once we've got dates confirmed, we will let you know. So, taking all of that into consideration, here are some of the qualities and skills that we think makes a final year student thrive. So just going through those, because of the nature of the program and how it's structured, we really need people who are self-directed learners, who are independent and organised and can show initiative. Students who work well with people do well in this program as well, particularly with their peers, with RCS, with the home universities. There's lots of people you need to be working with. Need to be highly professional, academically strong, and be able to work well online, given that the majority of your program will be delivered online. Need to be a good communicator, and finally, students really thrive when they get involved in their communities. So I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to hand over to Tim Corrie, who's one of our current final year students in Albany, who's kindly agreed to talk to you about his experience as a final year student with RCS.
Tim, you should be able to unmute yourself. Can I clarify that you can, please? I can see he's here. I don't think I can. Okay. Just give us a moment and we'll see if we can fix that. Okay, can you try for me now, Tim? Sorry for the delay. It does look like he has been enabled. I'm not quite sure what's happening there. We'll give him another moment and then We might have to return to Tim. Not letting him. Yeah. Pippin, if you're happy, we'll keep going with the presentation and I'll work with Tim to figure out what's going on with his microphone. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
So I'll then talk about the application process. So some things for you to consider. So this process of applying will be a challenge for many of you, and that's because there are limited placements available and it's a highly competitive selection process. So we're doing our best to provide as many rural places as possible, but these are the opportunities that we currently have available. And, we're really excited that we've been able to offer 30 places this year, but we still know that there are more students that are wanting to apply for this program. So historically, we've had 2 people apply for every 1 position on the final year program, and really good candidates do miss out every year. So I just want to prepare you for that possibility. But please remember that even if you don't receive a place on the final year program, you are still eligible to apply for a WACS internship, and there are many different pathways to rural medicine. Can you just go back to that slide, Ash? I've just got a few more things to mention. It's largely self-funded. We've already covered that. The program doesn't suit everyone's learning style, and it's really worthwhile reflecting on how you learn best and whether that does align with the final year program. You might find it helpful to talk to site MCs and current or former final year students about their experience to see whether it's going to work for you. And we do require you to have a driver's license. Thanks, Ash. Next slide. So this is the overview of the process and dates. So applications are now open. We will give you the link at the end of this information evening, and they close at 5 p.m. on Friday, the 17th of July. We are aiming to have offers sent out by the 21st of August, and you'll have 7 days to accept or reject your offer. There will be no second round offers. Next slide. Thanks, Ash. So our selection process mirrors the selection process you'll participate in this time next year when you're applying for your internship. So these are all the components that are scored by a selection panel, and I'm going to go through each one of them now. So we'll start with the cover letter. So the cover letter is an opportunity for you to include further information to support your application, and you can use it as an opportunity to highlight information that you've not addressed in your application in other areas of the application, or perhaps you'd like to expand on. So things like perhaps your motivation to apply, your future career intent, any local connections you have to the sites that you're preferencing, and other logistical reasons, for example, like reasons why you would like to be at a site. I suggest that you keep it brief, and we do restrict it to 1 A4 page or 400 words, and do make it look like a formal letter. You can address it to the RCSWA final year selection panel. So that's the cover letter. The next component, Ash, we have selection questions. So these are the 4 questions that you will need to answer on the online form. Our tip is that you need to be succinct and specific in your answers, because there is a maximum of 200 words per question. I won't go through the questions now. They will be available in the lecture, in the tutorial slides, or the slides at the end. We then ask for your site preferences. So if you are a KCRMT student, we require you to rank all 4 rural sites. If you're from UWA, Notre Dame, Fremantle or Curtin, you have a choice. You could rank all of the 4 sites, but be prepared and only preference sites that you would actually accept a position on. So, for example, if you would only like to be placed in Albany and would only accept a position in Albany, and if you happen to miss out, would then prefer to go back to Perth, you would preference it how it looks on the right-hand side. So number 1, Albany, number 2, Perth. But if you're happy to go to any of the 4 sites, then you can list them in order of preference. So you don't have to list all the preferences if you're from those universities. Next slide, thanks, Ash. Referee reports is the next component. So we obtain reports from your RCS sites, but then we also ask you to nominate a referee yourself. So this person could be a clinical supervisor, an academic supervisor, or a mentor. It doesn't have to be an RCS staff member, so it can be a non-RCS staff member. We ask that you've had considerable and recent, so within the last 12 months, professional or working relationship with this person, and you will be required to provide their details on your application form so that we can contact them. So make sure you have your referee's consent prior to nominating them, and that they are ready and available to provide a referee report, which will be emailed to them from RCS. The final component is that we look at your summative assessments so far this year on RCS. So the FOSCE does not come into this equation because that's a formative assessment, so only your summative assessments. And then finally, your professionalism assessments from the foundations and mid-year reviews. So please make sure before you go on your break at the end of this week that you have completed all of those assessments so that it can be included in your final year application. So this is just an overview slide of all of the things that we will require when you submit your online form. So the cover letter, your referee, your stat deck, a photo, and feel free to smile in the photo. It doesn't need to be a passport photo where you look a little bit grumpy. We like big smiles on our photo boards, your site preferences, and then the response to the selection questions. So application tips. Be authentic. So we want to hear your voice and reasons for applying, not a generic response that may have been artificially created. So just bear in mind that the selection panel are assessing, 40 to 50 applications. So authenticity and individuality will help you stand out. Also, make sure you allow enough time to complete your application, and hopefully the mid-year break will allow you some time to reflect and put together your best application. And just note you can't save a draft application on the form, so make sure you have everything ready to go. If you've got any questions, perhaps about one of the particular sites, here are the RCS final year staff that you're very welcome to contact. And for other logistical issues, Ashley and Misty can help. And then you'd also already be aware of Robin's contact details. So here it is. Here's the QR code that you can use to link to the form. Again, we will circulate this to you at a later date, but that's where you access the form. And just a reminder that the deadline is strictly 5 p.m. on Friday, the 17th of July. So shall we try and get Tim online?
Yes, his microphone should be working. Tim, we'll hand it over to you.
Hey there, Pippin. How are you?
I hear you now. Thank you, Tim, and
Very
thank
good.
you, Ashley.
It's all good. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me for the session today. So I think Pippin mentioned, but I was based in Broome last year and now based in Albany this year for final year. So a bit of perspective on both sites. But I think there's a kind of couple points I wanted to make about the final year program from a student perspective, which mostly kind of reiterate points that Pippin's already made. But I think the most important consideration when applying for final year is it is kind of a very different experience to the penultimate year experience curriculum-wise, in that you're kind of walking in two worlds, in that you've got all the teaching and things that are occurring through RCS at your site and online, but then you're still walking this, line of your home university curriculum. And I think that's probably the biggest thing to keep in mind for the year. And I don't think that that is necessarily for everyone, which is why I think I want to highlight it. And I think that's also why Pippin is reiterating the importance of being able to be a bit independent as a studier and being okay with online learning, because I think that is probably the biggest challenge of the year, is navigating walking in kind of two worlds. I'll also say I'm from Notre Dame, so I also talk about the experience of studying the Notre Dame's home curriculum. And essentially, most of our teaching you can either join live online, or all of it's recorded and you can watch later. And they kind of in the city follow particular streams of like Gen Med or Surge or Crit Care, all that kind of, they do it in one block and their teaching follows that. Whereas though we don't really do placement in that way with RCS, it kind of ends up being in a very different order, which means you can't really follow your home university curriculum in the same way. So it definitely requires a lot of kind of organizational skills and planning to be able to go, okay, what do I need to cover and in what time frame am I going to cover that? Because there's not really a set path that you can follow. You have to kind of pave your own path in that regard. So if you are someone who experiences FOMO, final year rural may not be the best thing. I think like that is something I have maybe felt at times this year, and it's been manageable, but certainly there's times where you're like, oh my goodness, it seems like they're doing all this different teaching in the city, and you can get a bit worried, like, am I missing out on that? Am I going to get the same experience? But I've recently been back in the city for placement and chatted with friends and have been fairly assured by the fact that I am covering the right stuff and I feel prepared enough. So I feel reassured by that. And I want to reassure you as well that you'll still get all the teaching that you need. And in that regard as well, like, obviously you can't do all exactly the same placements rurally, but most of the home universities, I'm sure all three of them, provide the opportunity for selective placements. So that's going back to the city for 4 weeks. And most of that is an opportunity to do ICU in the city, because most of the sites don't have ICU capacity. So I've just been in Perth for that for 2 weeks doing ICU at Charlie's. So I think that's a really good opportunity because it allows you to still get a little bit of metro experience and do ICU. Other than that, I really do feel like I've covered most things sufficiently. With Notre Dame, there's a big musculoskeletal, or a 2-week musculoskeletal component, which is a lot of rheumatology. And I've had a few days with a visiting specialist down in Albany, not to the same extent to what they might have got in the city, but I'm still getting it sufficiently, I think. So I think, you just got to be willing to be kind of flexible and adaptable to the fact that you might not get a perfect replication of what they're doing in the city, but you'll probably, get by no matter what. And I think that's where the decision also needs to factor in what is your plan for the future. If you are interested in being a particular specialist or working in a metro hospital, then maybe you might want to get metro experience. But I think for a lot of people that are looking to build a very general foundation as a student, which prepares you well for a junior doctor, then I think the RCS experience provides that. And especially if you're inclined to working rurally as a rural generalist or GP or even rural specialist, I think that you get a really good experience rurally. So, I think if that's something you're worried about, don't be too worried depending on your future plans. But it can be a little bit stressful at times of being like, what am I missing out on? I think the other consideration as well, especially on the back of coming back from a placement in the city, is what is best for your wellness and how you like your lifestyle to look. And I've definitely been reminded that I like the rural lifestyle more than the commuting in the city that I've just done for 2 weeks. So if that's a factor for you, that you're going to be more well living rurally and not having to commute and knowing all your the team's way better, then I think that's something you should definitely factor in, because I think, wellness is very important. So I think that's also an important consideration. And then and I think another point that I know a lot of people will be considering as well, tossing up between, if I know I want to apply rural, but do I stay in the same site or do I go somewhere new? I think that's a very individual decision. And if you struggle with change and you feel like you're still kind of adjusting to your current site, then maybe staying in the same place isn't a bad idea, and you do very different terms anyway. So I don't think that's a bad thing. But I think it's also can be beneficial to go to a different place if you're willing to accept that change and being willing to transition to a new place again. That can be quite disruptive, but it does allow a lot of opportunities. So for instance, there's things that I'm doing down here in Albany that I wouldn't do in Broome, and vice versa. So I think that's a very individual decision. And if you have any specific questions about a site, it's good to get in contact with someone who's doing placement in that site to try and get an insight into what that looks like and what sort of experience you get there. But I certainly haven't regretted going to Albany, and like, for disclosure, I'm going back to Broome next year for internship, but I absolutely do not regret coming down to Albany and getting experiences that I wouldn't otherwise get in Broome. So if that helps you make a decision on tossing up between going somewhere new or staying in the same place, that's that. And then I think the last little point I'll make as well is that if you're really worried about metro experience as well, as I said, there's the opportunity to do selective in the city for 4 weeks, but also consider, if you're still planning what you're going to do if you're elective, you also have the option of doing elective in the city. So for instance, I'm doing plastic surgery at Royal Perth at the end of the year, which I know some people go to really exciting overseas places, but like, that's still very different for me because I've been mostly rural. So you have the capacity, if you do rural, like RCS for final year, you still have the capacity for up to 8 weeks of metro placement in final year if you do both selective and elective metro. So that's just some food for thought. But I think that's the main points, is just, talking about walking two worlds of curriculum and the challenge of navigating that, being very independent and trying to balance a very diverse teaching schedule where there's probably more teaching than you can actually physically attend. So trying to prioritize that. So being prepared that that's how you have to approach the year. And then just considering what is best for you based on your future career planning, but also your preferred lifestyle and what makes you well from a day-to-day. So I think they're the main things I want to highlight. So I'll finish there, I think, Pippin.
Thanks, Tim. That was great. Does anyone have any questions for Tim or for myself? You're welcome to put them in the chat. We'll just see if there's any questions that pop up. Otherwise, we'll start moving into the breakout rooms. I can't see any, but I'm sure, Tim, you won't mind me saying that students are welcome to contact you later on if they'd like. What's the best way that they get in contact with you, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people can probably find me on Facebook. So I'm always happy with a message on Facebook. Otherwise, you can contact your MC and they can try and find my UWA email or whatever and email me. I really don't mind.
Yeah. Sounds great. Thank you. So we are really excited for 2027, in particular that our program's going to be expanding, and we're looking forward to having lots of people apply. I will now hand back to Ashley to sort the logistics of the breakout rooms, and hopefully we will see a few of you in those rooms, and feel free to rotate between the rooms. Thanks, everyone.